Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 530. Today, I am so excited to be talking with the phenomenal Heather McGowen. As a future of work strategist, keynote speaker, and thought leader and author, Heather is one of the leading voices on the fourth industrial revolution. She's transforming mindsets around the globe with her message about how the next phase of work will focus on continuous learning. Her groundbreaking approach has made employees more fulfilled, leaders more empathetic, and businesses more effective at reaching their goals. I know that you're going to love this conversation with Heather. All right, everybody, let's do this. Heather, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm super excited about this conversation. And before we dive into your second book, The Empathy Advantage, I would love for you to take us back a little bit. Give our listeners and our viewers an opportunity to kind of get to know you through your backstory and what has led you to me here today.
Yeah, I'm going to quote the Steve Jobs, the dots don't look that make sense. Connecting going forwards, only backwards. So I started my professional education, with an art degree from Rhode Island School of Design. And I went into design thinking, design strategy. It was a combination of behavior and creation, and really around problem finding and framing. And I loved that. And whether I was producing a product or helping people position a company, I love that. And then I asked a lot of business questions, and I found folks saying, well, you really need to get an MBA to ask those questions, which now you could quote to say, no, I don't. But back then you did. So I did. The art school MBA was a hard sell for some folks. And then I wandered all over the place. So I was in baby product design, medical product design, sporting good design. I helped people buy and sell companies. I did social responsible investing. And then I had a conversation with somebody who said, we're really rethinking RISD's Center for Design and Business, which was conceived at the time to teach business skills to designers, but really should be about teaching design thinking skills to businesses. I helped reconceive that. And then a professor of mine from my graduates program, my MBA program, had become president of a university. And he said, want to build a new college? And I said, sure, let's roll. I had never taught a class. And I built a new college focused on innovation by reorganizing half of an existing university. And the college focused on design, engineering, and business, bringing them together to focus on innovation. So it was a core curriculum, it was a new building, it was a new organizational structure, raising money, the whole thing. And from that, I got a good look at the supply side of talent and how it was broken in terms of how we form talent, set expectations, and set people off on the professional trajectory of their lives. And then all the corporate work I had done and I continue to do, I saw we didn't have the people that we needed for the world that was rapidly evolving around us. And between the two, working the supply and demand side of talent, I started just sort of doing these talks, explaining to people how the world would work. And I stumbled on the world future of work like 15 years ago and started using that word. And then it spun off in 2000, somewhere between 2015 and 18. I spun off to doing just talks. And so now I'm a keynote speaker. I explain how the world of work is changing, and I've written a couple of books on it.
Amazing. And you also call yourself a futurist.
Yeah, future work strategist, it's a made up term, honestly, because people are like, well, what do I call you when I introduce you? And they're used to saying, former executive of or doctorate at. And I didn't have those words, so they needed words. So my friend Donna said, pick one from this column, one from this column, one from this column. And we came up with future work strategist.
I love it. Columns are good ways to choose things sometimes, just makes it easier. What I love about future work strategist is that it sounds very fancy. And I also wonder, why is it, and I'm excited for you to answer this question, Heather, why is it that we don't have like now work strategists? Why is it the future that we're worried about and not now? Tell me more about that.
Well, I do tell people that once they I've worked with them and they get what I do, that I say, future sells better than now. Is really what I do is I tell you the now of work. I tell you
Yeah.
what is and has happened, and some of it you haven't noticed, and some of it you're not paying attention to. So it's not so much about, I don't tell you what AI is going to do, and I think that there's a lot of people out there peddling stories about how robots are going to take over and humans are going to be obsolete, and I think that's lazy, and I think it undersells human potential. But I think what we need to do is much more tap into our human potential and stop focusing on sort of codifying and transferring predetermined skills to make this deployable workforce of people who may never have to discover again, and instead just dine out on the training they've already gotten. I think that's completely unrealistic, and that was really the focus of our first book. Our Chris Shipley and I write together. Our most recent book is about how the changes that need to take place in leadership to adapt to a post-pandemic workforce.
Let's dive into that a little bit because post-pandemic workforce is something that's continuing to be redefined every single day still.
Yeah, and in fairness, we lost in the U.S. alone. We lost 1 million people. When was the last time we lost a million people that we never commemorated, acknowledged? I mean, the number of children, which is somewhere between 1 in 500 and 1 in 300 children, are orphaned by this, what we've gone through. A lot of people have gone through some really pretty severe trauma. So you take that piece of it, which we're not dealing with or talking about at all. You talk about how we shifted where work's going to take place, which everyone gets very obsessed with. And what we really did was we trusted people. We didn't have a choice. We trusted people. And they performed really, really well. We had almost no loss of business continuity, other things like the airlines that were shut down or on any business that was operating because you trusted your people and they performed. And I don't know why we don't build on that.
Hmm. I've never thought of it that way, Heather, that we trusted people and the workforce continued and we adapted,
Mhm.
except for airlines and things where we had to, be safe. I would love for you to talk about human potential and its relationship to this massive trauma that we've all gone through.
Yeah, so and other things that were happening around the same time. So this didn't happen, of course, in isolation. We've changed as a society. One of the things that that I often quote in my talks and certainly in the book is that in 1975, 87% of the value of all the companies on the S&P 500 came from tangible capital,
Hmm.
property, plant, equipment. So all the value came from making stuff into other stuff, basically.
Hmm.
And in that process, humans were just an input. They were a means that you wanted to keep as low as possible on the cost front. So we treated humans as cost to contain. Fast forward to 2020, 90 plus percent of the value of all the companies on the S&P 500 is intangible: patents, ideas, human activity. Yet we still treat humans as a cost to contain. We're always trying, what percentage can we lay off, and how can we keep our labor costs down? Some of it is an actual accounting problem that we still list humans as a cost, and so we don't see them as assets to develop. But the mindset shift has started to take place. Like the Business Roundtable in late 2019 came forward and said, Milton Friedman's shareholder value era, which said that the only social responsibility for a company was to return profits to shareholders, hasn't worked. We haven't made better value. We've decimated our communities, we've trashed the environment, and our employees are disengaged and burnt out. So the one big source of all of our value, we're treating like trash. And so we need to rethink this. So we're in the process of turning to what I call the human value era, where the greatest investment we can make is in each other's human potential. It's in all human potential. It's not just the stars, it's everybody. That's how we're going to move our society and our economy forward.
Here, here. I would love to have you talk about human potential and why empathy is so necessary when it comes to leading powerfully.
Yeah, so our prior leadership profile kind of looked like this. The boss was one, the person who wanted to be a boss. So there was certainly an ego component, and a lot of times that ego component had some insecurity in it because they're compensating for something. Not all leaders, but it was an unfortunate side effect. We valued unquestioned experts who could make decisions in certainty. We valued people who could drive productivity, even if it meant with domination, fear, or even humiliation.
Hmm.
And now any room I'm in, I say, how many of you have people reporting to you who have skills and knowledge you don't have? So even if you didn't care about empathy, how many of you? Well, almost every hand goes up, and every hand that doesn't go up, I say either you don't have anyone reporting to you or you're lying. Because it's impossible to run an organization today at almost every level. It used to be just at the C suite. Now it's coming to the front line without having rapid emergence of skills and knowledge, whether it's, chat GDP or it's cybersecurity or it's machine learning or it's, data analytics, fill in the blank. You just cannot be an expert on all these things.
Right.
So if you're making a decision in certainty, you're a liability. If you're an
Mm.
unquestioned expert, you are a huge flaw for the organization. So that whole profile we had before is now a huge liability. So if that's the case and all the knowledge is in your people and it's often not duplicated across your people, I say there's 4 shifts that we need to make. First is a mindset shift from managing people and processes to enabling people's success.
Yep.
And I say provocatively, you work for the people, they don't work for you anymore because their success is your success. So you got to shift your mindset around that. Second is a shift in culture. You used to pit your people against each other and they would vie for your attention, peers as competitors. Now you need them to collaborate because not only do they have skills and knowledge you don't have, they have unique skills and knowledge from each other. So they have to see each other to get stronger. The third is a shift in approach. So you used to be able to get people to perform by punishments, threats, and rewards. Now that performance is also reliant on learning and adaptation, which doesn't work that way. So you've got to shift from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. And then the final one is a shift in behavior. You can't do that domination, fear, or humiliation thing. You've got to do, how do I create effectiveness through inspiration? How do I create an environment of caring? How do I let my people know that I actually love them and care about them? And that's how they perform. And then when you kind of go through that, empathy is the only answer. It helps you understand how to motivate your people, which is different for each one of them, how to tap into their intrinsic, motivational drive and also their potential by helping them become what I call self-propelled.
So good. I'm going to summarize for our listeners because that was really, really meaty.
Yeah.
Mindset, you work for your team. Culture, collaboration is important. Your approach is intrinsic motivation, behavior, inspiration, and creating a culture of caring. And in order to achieve that, you have to have empathy.
Right.
How do you teach empathy?
Empathy is something that, some people say that everybody's got, potential. Not everyone's going to be as empathetic. Some of us have more given potential, like anything. But it's a matter of becoming more self-aware, becoming more motivated, asking people. It's a lot of reflection involved in like thinking about your own behavior. So sort of metacognition is thinking about your own thinking. Here we need people to think about their own behavior.
When you go into organizations and you teach them how to lead more powerfully by having empathy, what's the trajectory? How long does it take? How long is the buy-in and what are the results?
The ahas can come pretty quickly at different points in the organization. Some people knew something wasn't working. Other people were frustrated with what that was, that the world that they bought into isn't there anymore. That's one big one I get with a lot of folks. It's, I worked Saturdays, I've been in the office, and these young, and they don't understand that, yes, they were dominated and they were sometimes humiliated and they worked their butts off. And that got them to this spot. And now they've got to lead a bunch of people differently than how they were led. So I have to have empathy for them to begin with, because a lot of times,
Mm.
you have that. So there's the understanding where they're coming from, having empathy for them, helping them understand it. And every organization can be different depending on their readiness. But one of my favorite kind of aha moments was I was talking to this big biopharmaceutical company, very high level, Fortune 150 company, and it was the top execs. And one of them turned to me when we did this breakout after my talk saying, "Oh my God, I never had to know my people before. I mean, I just had to drive them. I didn't really have to know who they were. This isn't going to work unless I figure out who they are." And I was like, "Yes." And she
Oh,
was like,
that is
"Wow, that's going to be a lot more work." I said, "Yeah, it will be, but it'll be rewarding."
that is so beautiful and so interesting. I've never been in corporate, so I have never experienced that culture. And
Yeah.
so I really love learning about this. And I'm sure my listeners are taking away as many aha moments. What would you say, Heather, about somebody who says, okay, I'm going to have empathy for my team or my employees or my organization, but doesn't that dilute the excellence?
No, it unlocks it.
Tell me more.
If you don't think that your people will perform unless you're torturing them, I'm not sure where to begin with you, but
Well,
when
that's
when you
that's hilarious.
It's because it's what we think, right? But when you think about it, think about the last time that you had, it could be a boss most likely, but it could be a coworker, someone who like really showed they cared about you. They did something specific. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's an agent also who represents me, and she works for an organization, and she was going through a lot with her mom was in hospice, and her company could have given her a bonus. It could have, given her extra vacation, but instead they got in touch with her best friend and flew her best friend halfway around the world to be there for 2 weeks with her at a critical juncture and paid for everything to help her. She's never going to leave that company. She's going to perform for that company. They thought about her personally. They thought about her network. They thought about what she needed in that moment. And whatever they spent on it, they could have spent 10 times as much in a bonus. I guarantee you it wouldn't have meant a fraction of what that meant.
That is so beautiful.
That's how you
Wow.
unleash potential because you feel like, oh my God, they cared about me. I'm now going to care about them till the end of time. I'm going to perform. I'm going to step up at every moment that I can. Now, that doesn't mean we have to live in a hustle culture. That's a problem that we have, is we tend to turn that spigot on all the time as opposed to saying, okay, when do we really need people to kick in?
Right. And it's just human kindness,
Yeah.
which is so underrated.
Yeah. Yeah. When you trust people, it releases oxytocin, and it's a chemical. And Dov Seidman says that trust is the only legal human performance enhancing drug, and I think he's right.
I love that. That is so powerful. Heather, you also talk about why it's important to help speakers amplify their game so that
Mhm.
there's more, so the future has more voices.
Yeah, and more voices that look different than me, than you, than each other, because as if the lion is the only one telling, I mean, if the hunter's the only one telling the story, he's always the victor. That's not always the story. We'll get more better stories if we have more people telling them. So I'm a big
Absolutely.
advocate of your background, your experiences. It doesn't always have to be visible. There's all sorts of types of diversity. I think we need much more neurodiversity, cognitive diversity, racial diversity, gender spectrum diversity, all of it.
Absolutely. I love that you've created this community. We're in alignment there for sure.
I appreciate what you're doing on the front as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the book and what we can, let's say we are not in a large corporation. Let's say we're an entrepreneur, solopreneur. Let's say we want to lead ourselves better, or maybe we have a team of two. What can we learn from this book?
Yeah, so it really does work regardless of the size and scale of your organization. And Christian and I both write the kinds of books that we wouldn't mind reading. We appreciate that nobody has more time, nobody asks for a longer book, nobody asks for extra words. So the book is about 200 pages. I use a lot of visuals when I speak, which helps people understand things in a quicker way. So I think there's about 40 or 50 visuals in this book. Really can read it in a couple hours. And the way we designed it was the first, it's in three parts. The first part is meet your new workforce, because all the assumptions you had about your workforce prior to the pandemic in terms of who they were, what they look like, what they act like, and how you lead them has changed. And it's changed in part because we had, 3 years of behavior change.
Hmm.
We've got changing demographics, where boomers are starting to exit and quickly, which is causing some labor shortages. And Gen Z's coming online. Nobody really seems to know how to handle Gen Z. And one of the ha-has I had about a year and a half ago was, why are Gen Z the way they are? And one of the things I discovered is every stage of their life development has been trauma. They were born in 9/11. They don't know a time before terrorism. They went to grade school in the global financial crisis, so they felt economic fragility very early. Then mass school shootings started happening, so they felt safety fragility. Then the UN climate report. Many of them will say they're not going to have children because they don't think the planet's going to be there. 2018, it said we had 12 years. Then they've never known a time without war, really, because we're in the war of Afghanistan most of their lives, and then we've got the Ukraine conflict. the Me Too movement and the Black Lives movement came about as they were starting to get their sense of social constructs in the world. And then they finished their education and entered the workforce in a global pandemic. So it's no wonder that they have higher levels of anxiety and depression, but they are also our most diverse, well educated, and resilient, I think, ultimately, generation we've ever had. So they're going to really change. They didn't come to work with the habits that we had left behind.
Right.
Never had
Yeah.
those. So they're starting
Yeah.
fresh, and they'll be 30% of the workforce soon. So that's a huge piece of the organizational. The second piece of it is how do you organize work itself? So we've trained people to do kind of individual tasks and execution. Technology is just consuming a lot of those tasks. We've got increased churn in organizations, which means that people are job hopping more and more. And that doesn't not seem to be slowing down. So we're looking at somewhere between 25 and 30% of your workforce every year, which means you shouldn't have any project in one person's hands
Mm.
because and chances are 25% of them are going to leave. So,
Yeah.
and also, they don't generally have the knowledge they needed in one person. So it's collaboration everywhere. The models we've used in the past to predict things don't work anymore. So how we organize work in terms of how it gets done, how we plan for it, all changing. We're really kind of moving more towards a management consulting model where a project comes in and people swarm towards a project as opposed to making 3 to 5 year plans of doing the same thing. And then the last section is how you rethink your leadership, which is the 4 shifts that I talked about in terms of how do you lead this level of uncertainty with this workforce that you don't know what to do with, and they're empowered.
Yeah. Wow. I
So that
love your
for any organization of any
you
size.
said that could work for any organization. Is that what you said? I
Yeah,
interrupted you.
I mean the book, the way it's written and it's very approachable, is for can work for any organization.
Well, the empathy advantage, leading more powerfully in the workforce. We're going to put the link in the show notes for sure, so everybody can grab a copy. The contributions that you're making in the world, it's so powerful, and you're truly an influential voice, Heather. And I'm so grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been really nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Are you ready for some fast talk?
Oh yeah, let's go.
All right. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book, I have a bunch of them, but one of my favorites is a book called Legacy of Luna. And it's a story of Julia Butterfly Hill, who climbed up a redwood tree at the age of like 20 for what was supposed to be a one-day tree sit. She lasted over 3 years, and she developed empathy for the people who are trying to cut down the tree and kill her. It's a really profound sort of self-discovery, but also it has so many interesting layers of empathy.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm going to definitely check that out. Who's your favorite speaker and why?
I think the best speaker in the world, hands down, is Michelle Obama. I think she just nails it. I mean, she just every single time she can find the words, and her pacing and her connection is unbelievable. There are a lot of great speakers out there, but I think she is really remarkable.
I agree with you 1000%. When you're on a big stage, Heather, how do you memorize?
I don't I don't memorize things, so I use visuals to organize the arc I'm going to bring people through, and I explain them. But I just stand up in front of people, whether it's 25 people or 25,000 people, and I say, I'm just having a conversation with them. I'm just explaining to them what I'm thinking, and I'm just like I'm talking to you right now. So I'm not highly theatrical, and I don't memorize. So it's not they don't hear the same stuff over and over again. It's hey, this morning on the way down the elevator, I read this. So I had this plan for you, but let me explain to something I just heard about. And so it's always kind of changing.
Yeah. For our listeners and our viewers, uh, I recommend that if you are going to work like Heather, you have to really have an understanding of your material and your thoughts like Heather. Not everybody can do that, and
Yeah,
you are truly masterful at it. And having been across the screen from you just now, I can see that. I can see why.
yeah. No, it's my process is different than most folks. I know most folks do memorize, so but I don't.
Yeah, amazing. What do you do the day before you speak? What's your process there?
I try to hand the deck over to people early so I can stop obsessing about it. But if they haven't asked me for it, I'm obsessing. I'm obsessing. I'm obsessing. I'm like, what should I add this? Should I drop this? I've never gone overtime. I hate it when speakers go overtime. Please don't ever go overtime. it's selfish and you're stepping into somebody else's time. So I'm very disciplined in terms of my timing, but
Yeah.
I also want to make sure the audience is getting the most up to date, the most connected, and the most memorable stuff. So sometimes I get obsessed, but if I get to hand it in ahead of time, yeah, I'll walk my dog, I'll read a book, yeah.
Amazing.
So that was
What's
it.
your what's the podcast you're currently obsessed with, Heather?
I like Bill Maher's Club Random at the moment
Amazing.
because he gets all sorts of people on there, just like he does on his show. I mean, he right,
Yeah.
left, every industry. I'm always surprised by the people who show up, and it's an old like rumpus room from the '80s. It's called Club Random because it's randomly, and I think it emerged out of what he had to record out during the pandemic, and then he turned it into this. He just has these wandering hour talks, and they're just always very interesting.
That's amazing. I love his show, so I'll have to check out that podcast. Thank you so much for being a featured guest with us today, Heather. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
HeatherMcGowan.com, and it's McGowan.
And we'll put that in the show notes, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, for dropping in with us. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscription notification bell so that you get our latest, greatest videos. And let us know on Instagram what resonated with you today. Definitely grab Heather's book. And we appreciate that you spent time with us today. Remember, everybody, your voice matters. Big love.